Off to a little bit of a late start, so I'm sorry about that. I think that was on me. There's so many things going on in my head, so like blah, but hopefully all is good. Okay, so today's the 16th of Tammuz, actually my son's birthday, Shimon. The Hayom Yom. I have two kids who are born right before a fast. My daughter's born on the 8th of Av, which is before the big fast, 9th of Av, and Shimon's born 16th of Tammuz before the 17th of Tammuz. So I guess two births I was trying to get out of fasting. So I thought if I have the baby, right before the fast, then I won't have to fast. So it worked twice. So the Hayom Yom for today is that the Baal Shem Tov's Ahavat Yisrael, love of a fellow Jew, was beyond imagination. The Maggid, that means the Maggid of Mezrich, right? The Maggid of Mezrich was the Baal Shem Tov's main student. The Maggid said, if only we could kiss a Sefer Torah with the same love that my master kissed the children when he took them to Cheder as a teacher's assistant. So we know that the Baal Shem Tov was an orphan. He lost both of his parents. He was very young, and the kind of community took care of him. And then he sort of went rogue. He did a lot of living in the forest. He wasn't afraid of anything. And I guess he would take care of the kinderlach and walk them. Maybe if they had to walk through any kind of scary path or through the forest or whatever, the Baal Shem Tov's father, it's very famous that he told his son, you don't need to be afraid of anything, only Hashem, not to fear a thing. So we know that for a long time, the Baal Shem Tov was unrecognized as a master, right? As a Hasidic tzaddik, as a master, he was totally hidden. So people thought that he's just, a Cheder teacher, or even not even the Cheder teacher, just maybe the person escorting the little boys to Cheder, that he really wasn't much. He was just this orphan who is kind of a little bit wild. And we know actually he was this hidden tzaddik, and he was taught by Achia Hashiloni, who was a contemporary of David HaMelech. So his teacher was someone who had been living 2,000 years before he was living. So how could that happen? So Achia Hashiloni was coming to the Baal Shem Tov and teaching him from another realm, giving him private lessons, until he was 36. I think he appeared to him at maybe 18, until he was 36. We've talked about this before, and told the Baal Shem Tov that he needs to reveal himself to the world as a healer and as a tzaddik and as a rebbe. And the Baal Shem Tov didn't want, and Achia said, well, I won't teach you anymore if you don't reveal yourself. So he kind of got coerced into it. So really, they wouldn't see, when they looked at the Baal Shem Tov, somebody who was walking around with 1 million sforim. They wouldn't see someone who was running a yeshiva, but they were seeing someone who was kissing the children with so much love that the Maggid of Mezrich said, if only we would kiss the Sefer Torah with the kind of love that he kissed each child. So this idea of loving Ahavas Yisrael, so the idea of what a person is, we talk about the fact that we have to v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, we have to love each other as we love oneself, the love of a fellow Jew, Avas Yisrael. But really, when we're loving another Jew, we're loving a part of God, right? Every creation is containing a part of God, but a Jew has two souls. I guess the Jewish sages teach that every single creation has a soul, but the Jewish creation has two souls, a nefesh habihamayas, an animal soul, and a godly soul. And all human beings, but according to Torah philosophy, Jews have an extra dimension of this. We are godliness incarnate. So if we relate to each other as godliness incarnate, how can we not be loving to each other? And if a person has damage or has been wounded, then we understand that they've been damaged or they've been wounded, and we don't have to take abuse or mistreatment from that person. But the Hasidic, the mitzvah is that we still need to love them. We don't have to take we have to, if we need, we make appropriate boundaries to their behavior. We protect ourselves, but in essence, we need to see that they're creation of Hashem and to love them, Ahavat Yisrael. So there's three things that we're supposed to love with all our heart, really, is the God of Israel, the nation of Israel, and the land of Israel. So all of those things not demand from us, but invite us to relate to them as if they're things functioning on another level. So the nation of Israel, the land of Israel, talked about this many times. When we go to the land of Israel, you can't just look at it with regular eyes. You got to look at it and see this other dimension. Same with the Torah of Israel, that you could look at it as a history book, or in fact, I should say you can't look at it as a history book. Each lesson has layers and layers, and you got to look at it in this other way. And the nation of Israel, that as Jewish people, to look at us beyond just surface. So the Baal Shem Tov was able to do this to such an extent that that it says here, beyond imagination. So we should have Avas Yisrael beyond imagination. Now we're coming tonight to one of the fasts, and we know that there's two fasts that are 24-hour fasts. This is not one of them, gratefully. The two fasts are the 9th of Av, which is coming up in, I guess, in August. Well, actually, it'll be 3 weeks.
Late July. I think the last week in July.
Okay, so it's 3 weeks from tonight and tomorrow.
Tonight.
Exactly 3 weeks' time. And then the other big fast is the fast of Yom Kippur. Those are 24-hour fasts. Then we have a number of minor fasts, of which this one is one of them. And many of the fasts that we do, well, we have a fast before Purim. We commemorate Queen Esther fasting before she went into her audience with King Ahasuerus. But other than that, certainly this fast, the 9th of Av, that's going to be in 3 weeks, the fast of Gedalia, those are all concerning and related to the destruction of the temple and events concerned with contributing or leading up to the destruction of the temple. So it's interesting that the Hayom Yom for today is this Avos Yisrael, and we know that the 3 weeks is going to begin a focus on the destruction of not only the first temple, Beit HaMikdash, but the second one as well. And we know that a lack of Ahavas Yisrael is one of the fundamental contributing factors to the destruction of the temple. And especially the second one was destroyed in large part to a lack of Ahavas Yisrael, not enough Ahavas Yisrael. So in Hebrew, the term for not having enough Ahavas Yisrael can actually use a Hebrew word, which is even more, a Hebrew phrase, which is even more intense, which is sinat chinam, hatred for no reason. And I guess we can really identify with that now in our present times, because if people hold different views than other people, we see that it goes personal very, very quickly. And if people have different politics than other people, feel differently than other people about the environment, about climate change, about all kinds of issues. It used to be in certain time, way back in our history, that people could think, okay, so that's your opinion, I have a different opinion. But in today's world, if you have an opinion that is so radically different to me having that opinion, I could quite legitimately not want to eat in your house, not want to talk to you, not want to have anything to do with you. And there's what we call sinat chinam, baseless hatred, or yes.
There's a streaming service from Israel called HiFlix. It's only about $6 a month. And there's an unbelievable series that just started. They give a new episode every Wednesday. It's called The Lesson in English. And you have to watch it. Everybody's got to watch it.
I have HiFlix, so I'm going to watch it.
The Lesson. It's amazing. And it's that's kind of the theme, more or less. But there's this very agonizing interaction that happens between a teacher and his student, and it blows up, and it just keeps blowing up and blowing up, and it's based on a real story, on a true story that happened in Israel. And of course it gets very exacerbated and blown up by social media, because the kid is kind of powerless with the teacher. That's how I saw it. And so she turns to social media for her anger and her sense of control, and it becomes very ugly and it so divides everybody with such emotion, instead of just we have differences of opinion and let's discuss things and get somewhere and work things out. It's just like this
like fire
emotion,
like
fire. It's a brilliant show. It is so brilliant.
Okay,
and I'm watching it with this pain in my gut while I'm watching it. It's like,
well, I actually want to talk about two situations in relation to that. So we're talking about sinat chinam, which is baseless hatred. Hi, Suri, welcome. We're talking about sinat chinam, which is baseless hatred, and then the remedy for that is random acts of goodness and kindness, or baseless kindness, or baseless love without any reason, love beyond reason, and just not rational. You just do things for people. The Rebbe's people who were excited about this idea, they started doing these random acts of love and kindness, and people started creating little momentums on Facebook and random acts of goodness and kindness. So I just want to tell two stories. One is about the Arizal. So the Arizal is Rav Yitzchak Luria, and we know that he lived in Sfat, I think 16th century, or I'm not sure my history. I should look it up quickly. Rav the Arizal, and he was like the head of the Kabbalists in Sfat, right? The Arizal. And Rav Yitzchak Luria, considered the father of Kabbalah. Yes, he was born in 1534 and passed away in 1572. He passed away as very young, actually. And he came to Sfat, and he was really on this incredible level. And a plague was coming into Sfat, and the Arizal said that if everybody in his community would keep Ahavas Yisrael, if they would all be very mindful of this atmosphere of love and brotherhood and kindness and everything, he believes that he had the spiritual power that he would be able to keep the plague at bay, and that they wouldn't be affected by this plague. Lo and behold, there was a fight between two kids, maybe in the playground or at the park, and then their wives got involved in the fight, and then the husbands got involved in the fight. And when the Arizal heard about it, he said, we've lost our protection. And many people died in that plague, including him. So it's a very real thing. That's one thing. And we know those of you who were with me 1 year on Tisha B'Av, we had that real amazing learning. We were learning inside in the Mishnah, I think it was Sota, about the story of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa and the antagonism between two different people and how it kind of like spread and you know,
Even the rabbis didn't help out or didn't
the
defend.
rabbis didn't help out.
Yeah, I remember reading that too.
And from these kind of, you know, tiffs, actually they say led to the destruction of the entire, not just, that was the second temple, but even, you know, that was the second temple. But so this idea of loving others and forgiving others and going the extra mile to act for peace is a big thing. So it's going to be interesting when we come into the Parsha to look at that. So anyway, so that's that is the Hayom Yon, the 16th of Tammuz, and happy birthday to my son Shimon Yisrael, who's named for Shimon Shimon Bar Yochai, I'm sorry. Shimon Bar Yochai, my
I was just wondering,
grandfather, and the Baal Shem Tov, whose name was
that's wild.
Yeah. So so I want to dedicate tonight's class to a friend of mine who's going to be having a surgery tomorrow. Her name is Riva Leah Bas Leah. So that's an interesting that her name is Riva Leah, even though she's Bas Leah, but she should have a successful surgery and a refuah shalema. So coming into tonight, so we're in the month of Tammuz, which we've spoken about. One thing I didn't tell you about the month of Tammuz, which I want to tell you quickly, is Gimel Tammuz, we know is the Yortzeit of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but it's also the day that Yehoshua caused the sun and the moon to stop and their light to remain as it was for 36 consecutive hours, so Israel could finish their war. So they were fighting in the valley of Ayalon, which is actually interesting because my daughter just married a young.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I was like, wait a minute.
Then Yehoshua spoke to Hashem on the day when Hashem delivered the Amorites before the Bnei Israel, and he said in Israel's presence, "Sun, stand in place upon Givon, and moon upon the valley of Ayalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon remained in place until the nation had avenged herself upon her enemies. So that's the 3rd of Tammuz, the Gimel Tammuz. So that's another association with Gimel Tammuz, the 3rd of Tammuz. But now we're coming into tonight, which is going to be the 17th of Tammuz. And so we've got this fast. It's from sunrise. And I looked at my calendar and I thought, well, that's not a big deal because, you know, sunrise, it's probably like 6:30 or something. Not actually. Sunrise tomorrow is something ridiculous, like 3:30 in the morning. So if you checked, I don't know. So what are we fasting about so we're fasting in general, we're fasting and connecting to this destruction of the temple. And like all things, it doesn't just happen in 1 minute. So what actually happened was first the walls surrounding the old city of Jerusalem got breached. And you could say, well, is this fast corresponding the breaking of the walls of the first temple? Or is this the breaking of the walls around Jerusalem of the second temple? And it turns out that both temples, the walls were breached in Tammuz. With the second temple, it was actually the 17th of Tammuz. The first temple, it was breached on the 9th of Tammuz, but the Chachamim didn't want to make so many fasts. You know, you can imagine you have a fast on the 9th of Tammuz and then another one on the 17th of Tammuz, so they just kind of put it together. So one of the reasons why we're fasting is the breach of the walls around Jerusalem by the enemies of the Jews. So the first temple was destroyed by who knows who? Which
Babylonians.
Babylonians, and who was the king? Anybody know?
Not Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar,
No,
right.
right, Nebuchadnezzar.
Nebuchadnezzar. And the second time, it was destroyed by the armies of the Roman Empire, right? And that's one reason why we're fasting. It happens, though, that this date, the 17th of Tammuz, has a lot of stuff happening. And we explained before, remember, we spoke about Esav and Yaakov fighting over all the months of the year, and how Tammuz and Av and Elul all were kind of grabbed by Esav. And then we got Elul back and we got half of Av back, but we didn't get Tammuz back. So it's sort of in the clutches of Esav. So a lot of things happen in this month that aren't so good. So we know that this is when the Chet HaEgel happened in Tammuz, and the 17th of Tammuz marks the day that Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain where he was having private lessons with Hashem, right? Getting his downloads of additional information added on to what was received initially at Har Sinai with the revelation that everybody experienced. So Moshe went up for 40 more days for more details. And we spoke about how when he went up to the top of the mountain, he had to almost like lose his physicality and be able to interact with Hashem, almost like spirit to spirit, so to speak. And then he had to reconstitute into his physicality to come down. And that all took time. And so he came down and he saw that in his absence was this terrible mistake of the Arab Rav influencing the Jews to get involved in the substitute to their mentor and leader, and the golden calf and the dancing and all the licentious behavior, which often goes with idol worship. And Moshe coming down, holding the tablets, and then the tablets break. So the day that those tablets fall out of Moshe's hands or thrown out of Moshe's hands, also the 17th of Tammuz. So now we've got two things. Then we have in the first temple, they used to offer every day a korban tamid. Tamid means all the time, tamid, always. And then they couldn't find any sheep for the korban tamid. And so on this day, it says that they would let down, I think even when they were sieged at a certain point, they would let down a bucket with gold down outside the gates, and 2 sheep would be put in. And then eventually there were no sheep and they put goats in the bucket, but I don't think the goat was the right animal. Anyway, at some point they couldn't find sheep. And so that happened, the end of that Korban Tamid, which was obviously a very important thing. That also happened on the 17th of Tammuz. And then there's another unfortunate incident where there was all these wars and different things going on between Jews and the surrounding powers that be. But this is an intense situation. So this event is mentioned in the Mishnah in Taanis and in the Talmud Yerushalmi about a person whose name was Upastamus. And what did he do? He actually got hold of a Sefer Torah and he burnt it. He, as a way of showing his superiority or his dismissiveness of the Jews and their claim to Eretz Israel. He burnt a Sefer Torah. So this was in the time of the Roman procurator. His name was Communus, 16 years before the revolt against Roman rule. And the Roman military forces would engage in harsh provocations against the Jews and against everything that they held holy. And then what happened? So Communus dispatched armed forces to nearby villages, ordering his soldiers to arrest inhabitants and bring them before him. And then what happened? Then one of the soldiers seized a Torah scroll, and one of the villagers tore it up and set it on fire after the Romans would provoke them, and there would be all this unrest and everything. And this is the part that I wanted to share with you. From every corner, Jews were seized with trembling. It was as if the entire country had been set ablaze. Upon hearing the first reports, they gathered in their spirit of great zeal for that which they held holy. And like arrows shot from a bow, they hurried to Caesarea to appeal to Comnenus that he not save from retribution the man who had so greatly blasphemed their God and their Torah. And this leader, the Roman leader, understood that the people would not be easily placated. So he ordered that the guilty soldier be brought before him and hung on the gallows in front of his Jewish accusers. So even though the Romans plundered our city, put us, put us into siege, all those, just to remind you, all those horrible images we have on Tisha B'Av of the Jewish people starving as a result to the siege, we have to remember that they had food. I think we talked about it, they had a lot of food. They could have survived that siege, and the food was burnt by other Jews. So it's a piece to keep in mind. Anyway, so this Apostomus was actually hung on the gallows for burning the Sefer Torah, but nevertheless, he did burn the Sefer Torah on the 17th of Tammuz. It also marks the day that an idol was placed in the sanctuary. And it's interesting that somebody brought the idea that that on this day, Noah sent a dove out of the ark to see whether the waters had receded from the face of the earth. And we know that the dove didn't find a resting place. And it's brought down that the dove not finding its resting place is an allusion to the people of Israel, who are compared to the dove in not finding a resting place on this harsh day. So that's just a few things. So the idea of the fast is that, we can't just not eat and then not think about this is supposed to be a call to tshuva, a call to understand that why is there conflict? Why are there people who want to hurt us, burn our Sefer Torahs, tear down our temples? What's the root of all of these horrible things that happen to us? What's the root of all these things? So I'm asking a question. So I'm going to wait for responses from you. What's the root for all of these things?
You mean the reason why they happen to us?
The reasons why they happen to us or happen to other people, any kind of wars, places where we inflict pain or suffering on others. What's the root of it? What's the root of
like arrogance?
Okay, arrogance.
There's a lot of roots.
Okay, let me hear.
Sometimes it's people fighting over, people just want power over one another. Sometimes it's over resources. And maybe I'm getting too geopolitical here and less spiritual.
Geopolitical is good.
Okay. Yeah, land, water, food, resources.
So land, water, and food are all people fighting for survival and people feeling that there's not enough.
Right, not knowing how to share.
That it has to be survival of the fittest, right? Because I have a friend, her name is Robin, and she's plugging me into the idea that, and helping me understand that every single action that is an action of aggression, an action of inflicting pain, an action on feeling pain, is all because we get disconnected from source. we get disconnected. Imagine if we were plugged in, like we say, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, right? God is one. Everything is God. Imagine if our ability, our consciousness could plug into this reality the way we plug our phones into the wall, right? A plug into an outlet. So if we plug into the outlet, we know that the phone is going to get charged. We don't have to worry because we're plugging it in. If we could plug into the fact that God is abundant, that God can provide for all our needs, that we have everything, that we don't have to prove ourselves better than another person. If we can plug into this reality and be one with this reality all the time, then we don't have to prove that we're better than other people. And we know all of our needs are going to be provided for. So the root cause of all of the suffering, all of the destructions of all of the temples, all of the hatred, all of the everything is disconnection from source, disconnection from our root, disconnection from God, disconnected from the fact that God can provide abundantly if we connect it. We get disconnected and then we feel afraid and we feel we have to fight. And if we have, they can't have, or if they have, we can't have. And so if we could, so in a way, when we're fasting, what is the tshuva that we have to do then? What kind of tshuva do we do? What's the fundamental part of the tshuva that we have to do?
Connecting with God.
We have
The relationship.
tshuva on the disconnect, right? On any place where we disconnected. So the tshuva is plugging in. So yes, we're fasting. Yes, we're remembering all these things that happen. But the idea is, can we live as if that little cell phone, it's not the best image, but that's plugged in to the source of electricity, that we constantly being charged because we plugged in. And if we're not, then that's what we have to do tshuva on, the part of us that's not plugged into the system. And God is the system, God is the matrix, right? So when we plug into that, then we can be resourced. When we feel unplugged, then we get afraid, we get hostile, we get aggressive. we don't like other people because we disconnected from that sense of abundance and resource. So an interesting way of thinking about it.
Can I ask you a question? Because I'm definitely one of the people, because of the medications that I take. I get migraines. I cannot fast. But can you still reach that level?
So the rule of the fast is that if a person is pregnant, nursing, or are not well, they don't have to fast, but they shouldn't. So they shouldn't use on the day. They shouldn't eat abundantly. You
right
for your needs. You eat for your needs, and even though you're allowed to wash and you're allowed to use oils and whatever, it's not officially not allowed, but it says a sensitive person doesn't overindulge in the washing and the oils.
Yeah.
So it's a day of contemplation and plugging in. And so even if you're eating because you have a medication, you can still be in that, mindset of plugging in, for sure. Not eating is supposed to help us to do that, but it's also the consciousness. Now, even though our retreat is happening in the 3 weeks, the whole period of the 3 weeks is a time of reflection. And I guess the idea is to concentrate and focus on this plugging in, this plugging in time. So we will explore that more when we get there next week. So that's sort of all coming up into the Parsha. So there's two interesting things about the Parsha. I'm going to share the screen and we're going to look at the Parsha. Where is my screen? I found it on my other. It was all ready for me, but then I was on the wrong place. Okay, so there it is. Okay. So the first thing is that in last week's Parsha, we had this story of Pinchas. And so just to catch you up, Balak hires Bilam to curse the Jewish people. Every time Bilam opens his mouth, brachot come out. And so Balak says to Bilam, well, this isn't really good value for my money. You're supposed to help me curse the Jews. And then Bilam says, well, I have an idea for you. Obviously, me cursing the Jews is not working out. So if I can, I've got a good idea for you, $1 million idea. Get your women who are connected to idol worship, your Midianite woman, and let them entice the Jewish men and into idol worship, and then Hashem won't be so happy with them, and then it'll be very easy for you to defeat them. So the woman did exactly that. I spoke about it. They made fairs, they made open air markets, they told the men to come to the back and see their more specialized goods in the back, and they got them involved in idol worship. So the idol worship, we didn't talk about this before, was the worship, something called Baal Peor. Now, Baal Peor, when you look it up, it says Peor is really the top of the mountain. That's where Bilam and Balak were looking at the camp of the Jews. And Baal just means idol. So it's the idol of Peor. So it doesn't have so much specificity. It's really the idol that they worshipped on top of that particular mountain. But upon further research, something about that idol and the idol worship was connected to fertility rites and fertility related. So one of the ways to serve this idol was through sexual acts. So not only did the woman seduce the men, but they seduced the men so that the men would be performing sexual acts with them as a way of serving the idol. So when Cosby and Zimri, Zimri being a prince in the tribe of Shimon, he comes in front of everyone and he brings Cosby, who's a princess from the Midianite nation, and he brings her right in front of everyone, and they go into the tent to serve this idol and engage in service to the idol. Then Pinchas comes, and we know he takes a spear and he stabs them both while they're in the act of sexual connection. So, wow, that's intense.
I never heard that Baal Peor had anything that was, maybe people don't want to discuss it. They don't say that the sexual act is part of the Avodah Zarah.
Yes.
Because it's not like so.
Yes, it makes the story a lot more juicy, which is why while they were being sexual together, when Pinchas comes and he's like, this is too much. Like, this isn't even in a private area. This is in front of everybody. And I think that was part of it, that they go together, this idol worship and the sexuality and all of it being kind of wrapped up. So what happens to Pinchas? So now this is where we are. This is what happens. So what happens to Pinchas? He did a very zealous kind of thing. And so here we are. This is where we are. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying, Pinchas, the son of Eliezer, the son of Aaron, the Kohen, has turned my anger away from the Bnei Israel with his zealousness, avenging me among them, so that I didn't destroy the children of Israel, because Hashem was very angry with this involvement. And apparently there was a plague that killed 24,000 Jews, 24,000.
Wow.
So that's how lost they got into this. In other words, Bilam's plan worked really well, and a lot of people bought into it until Pinchas came along and stopped the plague and acted very zealously. And now, this is really the interesting thing. If we read Pasuk Yud Beis or 12, I think this is the most unbelievable thing. L'chein emor hineni nosein lo et briti shalom. Which, if somebody wants to read verse 12, what is that? What does it say?
And We don't have the screen up.
You don't have the screen there.
Oh, I didn't share my screen?
No,
Oh, my goodness.
Only did it halfway.
we
You
talked
did-
about it, but
Oh, I'm like, so now you see my WhatsApp, but you're not seeing my screen. So let's see. do you
now we
see-
see the
now
screen.
we see it.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so it says, so Pasuk Yud Base. Therefore, so somebody want to read Yud Base there?
Therefore say, I hereby give him my covenant of peace.
Now, isn't that absolutely amazing?
Mhm.
Pinchas is a zealot, and he takes a spear, and he runs, and he spears Cosby and Zimri while they're in the act of this sexual, whatever they were doing. And Hashem doesn't say, wow, that was aggressive, that wasn't politically correct, that was, you should have spoken to them nicely and whatever. He just says, I'm giving you my covenant of peace, which is incredible, which I think is such a lesson, because there's a thing, if you're not mean, if you're too kind to the evil, you'll be evil to the kind. And that's what's happening in our world a lot.
It is, you're right.
If you're too kind to the evil, you'll end up being evil to the kind. I mean,
That's not even really what he was doing. He wasn't killing them for a covenant of peace. He was covering them for avodah zarah. So that's why I
Yes.
don't understand why he's
well,
even
he was
saying that that's what-
he gives him the covenant of peace.
Sorry about my ringing. I'll mute.
No, I didn't hear it. He gives him the covenant of peace because he was zealous for Hashem, and he atoned. Hashem was very angry with the Bnei Israel because they were caught up in this delusion, illusion, confusion, and he brought peace because he brought an end to it. He brought peace because he was the one who stopped the plague. He brought peace because Hashem, this act of zeal, atoned, and Hashem felt there was a sanity brought back into the situation. Anyway, there's more to say about that, but I want to move on to a different topic, which is an interesting topic in of itself. And that is who becomes the follower. So we're not going to share for a minute. Who becomes the successor of Moshe Rabbeinu? Because
Yehoshua.
Who?
Yehoshua.
Yehoshua. But why not Pinchas? Why not Pinchas? There we go. Remember Moshe Rabbeinu, who he grew up in the palace of Pharaoh, and he went out one day, still being an adopted son of Pharaoh, and he saw two men. You know, remember he saw the Egyptian beating up the Jew, and he didn't take a spear, but he acted zealously, and he became the leader of the whole people. And here Pinchas is doing something very brave, and because of him, he stopped the plague of 24,000 deaths. And he was from the tribe of Levi, and Moshe was from the tribe of Levi. Yehoshua was not. So Rabbi Yitzchak Ginsburg asks an interesting question. He says, like, why is Yehoshua chosen as the successor to Moshe and not Pinchas? Pinchas is the zealot. Yehoshua, what's Yehoshua's quality? Does anybody know what's his quality?
He knew how to talk, right? He knew, like you said, Moshe wasn't a great talker and a leader,
Right.
but did. He was a softer, more interactive, communicative type of person. And Pinchas had kas.
Right. So it's an interesting, first of all, the idea of why Moshe couldn't go into the land of Israel. We all know, right? Why not? What was the reason?
The rock.
The rock. What happened?
He was stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Right. Exactly. So Moshe struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. So there is an interpretation of this event that it's not that Moshe was punished that he couldn't go into Israel, but that the generation had changed the people that came out of Egypt, that Moshe led. And remember when they first crossed the Yam Suf, the Red Sea, when they first crossed it, they were all thirsty. It was tiring business crossing through the dry land there, through the Red Sea. When they got to the other side, they didn't have any food. They didn't have water. They were thirsty. And Hashem told Moshe, take your staff and hit the rock and water will come out. So it's not that Moshe did it without a precedent. But that generation that had Moshe leading them, that generation's all died out. It's practically almost 40 years later now. They're ready to go into the land. Now, says Yossi Jacobson, says Nir Manussi, says quite a few other people who comment on this idea. Now the people need a different kind of leadership, not hard, heavy-handed, hit the rock kind of leadership, but a talking, like Susan says, a talking to the rock kind of leadership. Also, Yeshua has this slow and steady approach, right? He's been Moshe's right-hand man, his assistant for over 40 years. That's very consistent. And it says, like Susan said, also he could adjust to the people's needs and speak to them. And also he has a sense of patience. He plays the long game. He's a descendant of Yosef. And Yosef, we know, had a lot of patience. He had this whole plan. He became viceroy in Egypt. There were 7 years of plenty. He was planning it out. He'd get his brothers to come. He would say that you couldn't send a shaliach. You had to come yourself. He would make them sign in, announce their names. He had a long plan. How he was going to finally, work things out with his brothers. So Yeshua also, he meets Rachav, he comes back, red string, he marries her. And it says that Rachav is actually the mother of daughters who become the mothers of prophets. So Yeshua is this kind of long plan, slow and steady. Then we have Pinchas, who's this zealot and excited and spontaneous and excitable. So
Impulsive.
Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg, again, remember we spoke about before, there's Shtus de Kedusha and Shtus, there's Ruach Shtus and Shtus de Kedusha. Does anybody remember what those words mean? Ruach Shtus and Shtus de Kedusha. Anybody remember those two phrases? So Ruach Shtus is a spirit of craziness that comes into a person's head. It says nobody sins unless they get a ruach shtus, like a craziness. But then it also says that sometimes you need to serve God with shtus de kedusha, with a holy craziness. You got to go out of your boundaries and out of doing everything always measured and rational. Sometimes you got to do things for the sake of God that are a little crazy. So Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg says here that we have two different ways of serving God. We've got the way of Tohu, not tofu, but Tohu, which is the service of chaos, of impulsiveness, of passion, of power. That's Pinchas. And then you have the service of Tikkun, which is organized and measured. But Mashiach is not going to come until the light of Tohu shines in the vessels of Tikkun. Mashiach is not going to come if it's always slow and steady. That for Mashiach to come, we have to find and embrace that spirit of Pinchas, that zealousness, that activeness, that element of passion, that alacrity, like a certain speed. Like Yeshua conquered Eretz Yisrael, but he didn't conquer all of it. There was a certain part that he left out. And he's saying that this aspect of I'll read it to you in Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg's words. When it comes to the final redemption, first we must aspire to access the lights of Tohu, of chaos, consciously reaching up to this lofty goal reveals the power to rectify the vessels that will contain them. This is the meaning of the phrase, when the lights of Tohu condense, they form the vessels of Tikkun that can contain them. Pinchas reached up and touched the volatile energies at their source. But then Yeshua comes and he puts them into these vessels of containment. When Mashiach comes, we will experience liberation and alacrity. This will fulfill the Rebbe's demand for the lights of Tohu within the vessels of Tikkun. In other words, all those kids in today's world who are, I don't want to say off the derech, but people call them off the derech or frying out or rebelling, in a way, according to the Rebbe's Shita and according to even Yossi Jacobson, there's an energy of Tohu, of this isn't making sense to me. I need something more. I got to, there's this like bam, bam, bam. And that what we have to learn is to take that energy and not squish it, but find containers of tikkun for that energy. You can't squish that energy because that's the energy of Mashiach. So Pinchas, who's reincarnated as Eliyahu, there's a very high thing in that energy. It's not the leader, wasn't Yeshua. He wasn't picked to be the leader, but Rav Yitzchak Ginsburg is saying that that energy, we can't just have the Yehoshua energy. We have to have some of the Pinchas energy and learn how to challenge that Pinchas energy and put it into sustainable, balanced, healthy, enduring qualities, but don't leave it out. That's the spice. That's the hot spice, the hot sauce, the pepper on the bland. And then he even says in this week's Parsha, we end up talking about the different korbanot, and there's a korban tamid, which is every day, but then there's the musaf, the special occasions, the extraordinary, and that we need both. And so that's what he was bringing out of the personas of Yeshua and Pinchas. And the name of the Parsha, which I didn't say yet, is Pinchas.
It's Pinchas.
Pinchas.
I came to the conclusion that was the case.
Yes. So any questions before we, or comments before we wrap up? Any comments or something? Yes, Susan.
There are two Mashiachs, supposedly, Ben Yosef, Ben
David.
So could it be that one is Tohu and one is Tikkun, and one is, it's like a blend of both too, and they're different types.
That would make a lot of sense. And also Yeshua is a descendant of Yosef. So Yosef is this maybe it's the, it's one energy, the slow and steady, and then there's this other energy, which is David HaMelech. He was, red-haired, descendant, I think also, I think of Yehuda, right? Mashiach.
Yehuda has, yeah.
So maybe that the idea of Mashiach is the combination of these two energies, Tikkun and Tohu. So we know Esav, just going back, Esav was all the Tohu energy, right? The power, but not channeled at all. And Yaakov was the Tikkun energy. But then his mother said to Yaakov, you got to step up. You got to dress up in the clothing of Esav. You got to put on those hairy skins on your arms. And Chassidus explained that the hairy skins on Yaakov's arms is interact in the world in a bit of an Esav way, like man up, get out of your comfort zone, be a little bit Tohu-like in your being. And so the Mashiach vision is the integration when Yaakov and Esav make friends, the integration of the Tohu energy of Esav, but in the vessels of Yaakov.
And balance.
The balance.
Thank you.
But we
That was great.
do need the enthusiasm and the passion that Pinchas represents, that like jumping out. I mean, halachically, he wasn't really supposed to do that. He didn't ask permission. He didn't ask Moshe. He just like this just does not seem right to me. Bam, just jumping in. It's not always the right thing, but Pinchas apparently was enough of a righteous individual that he knew how to make the right call. So we should, find that in us to have that passion and excitement.
Okay,
be able to moderate
I
it.
was walking around during the class. I can't sit so long. I was having.
So that's okay.
When I'm at work, I do it, but it's whatever.
It's okay. No apologies necessary. Okay, so see, no class next week because of the retreat. Susan will speak on the phone. I'll call you now, and all the best to everybody.
You too. Thanks.
Have a
Shabbat
good-
shalom.
All the
Everything
best.
should go well at
Rafa.
the retreat.
Yeah.
You.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night.
Night.